afternoon, everybody. It's nice to have you back, and I'm just thrilled to see that so many people are interested in this topic, which is the question of credit transfer from community colleges to universities. What kinds of things can impede the transfer of credits accurately, and what we can do to solve those problems, or what we are doing already to solve those problems. This is probably, well, it is one of the most important questions related to transfer. Obviously, we want to connect our students successfully to the right transfer university, but once they get there, if they lose credits in the transfer, they're very unlikely to graduate, or certainly much less likely. So today we have four experts. We have Misty Sommers from Kent State University. We have Dr. Shanna Jaggars from Ohio State University. Sorry, I should say the. I am a graduate. And Dr. Paula Compton and Dr. Candice Grant from the Ohio Department of Higher Education. We're going to start off with Misty. Misty is a transfer operations analyst, and she works carefully with her team to make sure that credits do transfer, and one of the issues that she's encountered is timing, but she is also going to address questions of workload and communication, I believe. So, and I'm so glad that she suggested this topic, and I am thrilled to have her here. Hello, Misty, take it away.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Deb. I'm just to make sure everybody's alert on this wonderful Friday. Before I jump into my presentation, I'm just going to take 2 minutes just to play a little game with everyone, just kind of get us all started and woke up. I don't know how many of you have ever played a game called Card and Go Seek before, but this is what it looks like. You can see it. But the basics are that you just have to seek whatever's on the card. So let's say, for example, if I was sitting in my room with my 13-year-old son and I said, okay, you know, we have to find something that can be worn. I could grab my sweatshirt, he could show me his sock, grab the scarf, we could say Bernie Sanders gloves. Actually, that would apply to a lot of these cards. Has stripes, it's soft. Find something used to cover something else. A dog would like it. My dog would like it. A cat would like it. Makes you look good. So what I'm going to do, though, since we all have our cameras off and we can't just shout things out, and honestly, I don't know how many of you actually have 50 years of like random miscellaneous clutter in your house like I do, we're going to use the chat box. So I want everybody to pull up your chat box on the meeting. Make sure your cursor is in the little type message here box and get ready to type, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a card. And when I flash the card, I'll give you like 15 seconds to go ahead and type something into the chat box that you think matches that category. Okay? And don't worry, you don't actually have to find it in your house. Just type something in there. It'd be a lot more fun if we had emojis and stuff, but I'll just accept the words for now. So make sure everybody finds their chat box. Get your cursor in there. All right, ready? We're gonna go with this card. Type in something that smells good. Something that smells good. Wow. Holy cow, you guys are all really alert for a Friday. I had to have like 3 cups of coffee just to get ready for this. Cincinnati chili? That's awesome. That's awesome. That was way faster than 15 seconds. Oh yeah, Mountain Dew smells good too. I didn't even think about that. All right, let's try one more before I start talking, because, you know, this is way more fun to talk about than transfer stuff. What about something that you would take camping? Matches, firewood, water bottle, flashlight, Cincinnati chili, porta potty, my dog, marshmallows, hammock, Mountain Dew. It sounds like there's a lot of chili and Mountain Dew getting eaten for lunch today. So I love camping too. Hotel reservations. That's good. I like that. All right. So now that I know you guys are awake and I know you know how to find the chat box, if you have questions, use your chat box. Since your cursors are already in there, Jonathan Gates agreed to go ahead and monitor the chat for me to see if there's anything urgent that comes up. But otherwise, I'm just going to try to get through the presentation and go through and talk about all of the issues that we have. And then we'll go back and we'll look at some of the questions that are in the chat. I just don't want to take a chance of you guys forgetting to ask a question or bring up something pertinent because I keep talking and you don't have a chance to ask the question. So make sure if you think of anything whatsoever, put it in the chat and we can cover it after I'm done talking. I tried to keep this as terse as possible, so that way we had more time to discuss it once it was all done. Okay. All right. So I am going to share my screen. If I can get this to work right. All righty. Okay. So I hit share. And hopefully that worked out pretty well. If you cannot see it, give me a heads up. Otherwise, I'll assume that it's showing for everybody because it does say I'm screen sharing. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. Basically, the topic is transfer evaluation timing. So basically, where does the transfer evaluation fit in the whole admission to enrollment timeline? Let me get to the right screen here. That's the hazard of having too many screens at my access. So let's jump right into this transfer credit evaluation. When I say official, I mean that the evaluation is done by your credit evaluation staff who are masters at state and institution policy guidelines. This is the evaluation that results in courses showing up on the student's record in your SIS. So I'd like to address that particular that yellow section on the timeline today. There are numerous reasons why I brought this up. First of all, it's a really important recruitment tool. Transfer enrollment is more important now than ever. The student population is lower and it's projected to continue that way. And our staff are overextended and stressed more this year than ever. So let's see if we can find the optimal timing that increases enrollment, optimizes staff resources, and most importantly, benefits the students. After all, that should never be sacrificed, right? The fact that we want to benefit our students. So let's take a look at how a year looks like to a potential transfer student. So that green part at the top is the student who has to deal with homework, roommates, exams, delivering pizza, and that needy best friend who now says that they just don't call anymore. Then they have their spring advising appointment, pardon my misspeaking. Then they have their spring advising appointment and then reality sets in. So right about now, they're thinking something like, oh, I'm so excited about finishing my associate's degree. I better make sure I reserve my spot at that 4-year school so I can get this over with quick. Or even more likely, they're thinking, oh, this place is ridiculous. I need a change. I want to get out of here now. My roommate doesn't even shower once a week, but they have to figure out if they have enough energy or money to fill out one more stupid form or application. So now it's your job to grab that student while they're willing enough to uproot their entire academic life. We all know how short of an attention span that students have these days. And when they're ready to jump, they want to jump right now. They're kind of like that kid at the top of the stairs who's screaming, I can fly, and you have to run and catch them before they land on the cat. So you do it. You catch them and you set them down safely while the cat gives you attitude. You dust off your student and say, there you go, run along, and everything seems great. But then you look at all this red stuff. Well, the red stuff is that hyperactive, like 1-year-old dog that runs across the room and sweeps the student's feet out from underneath them. The red is all the things that happen that no one likes to talk about. All those fun changes that the faculty and the state and your administration make just in time for next year. It could change what placement tests they have to take, what courses they register for, or even how many more semesters they have to attend. So things like their placement tests and exams, registration, and then classes filling up that they didn't plan on, any curricular updates, final transcripts start coming in, and now there's grades from their spring semester with new courses. Then their advisor has a syllabus review, and you never know how long that could take. AP, IB exams, those come out, and all of a sudden they've got classes. So let's talk about those red things. Curriculum updates that change their major roadmaps or force a change of their major field of interest. Then you have orientation and advising that contradicts their original assumptions. So when they first made that decision to transfer over to your institution, they had an initial assumption in their head of what would or wouldn't transfer over. And sometimes they show up in that orientation and all of a sudden they learn something new that they weren't prepared for beforehand. Then of course there's exam credits where students receive credits for enrolled courses, or an exam credit that they did not receive that they were counting on getting. Now they have to enroll for that course, whereas before they thought that course was already done. Then you have placement exams that just didn't go as well as planned. You have failed spring transfer courses at the original institution that maybe they had planned on using that course towards something, but because they got so caught up in the transfer process, they let that course go. Now that course doesn't count because they either failed it or they didn't get the minimum grade required for that particular major. You also have syllabus reviews that might have been prompted by other students or articulation agreements. And now that course comes over differently than it did when they originally looked at your transfer guide. And now all of a sudden that course counts towards something completely different, and they had relied on that course to come over as the one that they needed. And then of course, we have statewide updates and new alignment guidelines that happen in between that time they first made that decision. Keep in mind, very few of these things are actually in the student's control, and there's a million other factors that could come up. I'm sure you can all think of something that you've come across in your experiences with your students. So just keep in mind that this isn't actually a full comprehensive list. It's just meant to get you thinking. So the question is, when is it too early to do an official evaluation? So we have to consider whether your institution has the staff available to actually offer unofficial evaluations earlier in the student timeline. And even if you do, and I can tell you that this is one of the reason I'm doing this presentation is because it's a topic that comes up almost every single year in my office. Can we do evaluations earlier? Can we push them earlier? Can we do unofficial evaluations before they even transfer to our institution? So with recruitment, enrollment, and so much pressure on transfer students, we're constantly trying to push that evaluation timeline earlier and earlier and earlier in that student timeline. So even if you do have the staff and you do have someone doing those unofficial timelines, how many of those students are going to be double touched by staff? In my example, and these are just general estimated numbers that I came up with from our office. In general, about 7% were being evaluated twice. So if we had approximately 50 unofficial evaluations done per month by one transfer admissions specialist in our office, but yet our processing office was processing 700 a month. Approximately 7% of those students were getting processed a second time later on and might have gotten a change in that evaluation. I know 7% sounds like a small number, but we have less resources now than we've ever had. So suggesting that we review the same data twice just seems like a waste of limited staff resources. So what about the option of letting students do a self-evaluation? using an online transfer guide instead of having the advisor do it. There's great programs out there if you have the funds to purchase it. So let's assume that you do. With that self-evaluation, does that still answer all the same questions that a real person can answer? How high of a chance is there that the student might misenter their information or misinterpret their information and then be misadvised by themselves? Lastly, even software programs have limitations when it comes to showing students the difference between what courses will transfer versus how many of them will actually count in the program or the field that they're interested in. Sure, some programs connect to graduation audits. So there are some softwares out there that will show where those transfer courses will fit in a graduation audit. But we all know how well students interpret those audits all by themselves. We have to make sure that they are getting any information that might impact them along the way. We have to make sure that we are reinforcing to them that these early evaluations could be fluid. So we have to make sure that they're prepared for those things so they don't have that sudden shock syndrome when they show up right before their fall classes. Now, best practices say that we should place time limits on specific disciplines where the content changes on a routine basis, such as computer science, biological, physical sciences, international policy, law, and other technologies. What they're referring to is placing time limits on something. So if a student took the course back in 1982, that Fortran course isn't going to be the same as a C++ programming course in this current catalog. That's something that you can ensure with your transfer tables, but that things with some of those practices can go out of date within a year, the way technology and sciences can change. So those are things that are going to impact a student's evaluation. Another reminder from best practices is that students should be evaluated on the catalog year they are following, including meeting all program and degree requirements. However, credit should be awarded based on the content of the course at the time it was taken. So in plain English, that means the syllabus that was in effect for the transfer course at the time they took it should match your most current catalog available at your institution. Which can be an issue if you're approving and you do that student's evaluation in January before those curricular changes are made. So what is actually ideal for your institution and the student? Obviously, different institutions and different programs are going to handle it differently depending on the size of your institution and the type of programs that you have. So, let's see here. So some questions that we should ask. To make this all bigger, better, stronger, we have to streamline resources and focus on what's most important. So to do that, I've come up with a few questions that every institution should ask themselves. The first thing, can our students find our transfer policy information quickly? Kent State is always, and I'm speaking from Kent State's point of view, by the way, I'm from Kent State, if I didn't mention that initially. So our transfer policy information, we are always reviewing ways to try to streamline and organize our website better. Most recent update was to add a kent.edu/transfer. Common offices are linked, including major and pathways, the admissions, transfer credit, tuition scholarships, everything. Kind of, they're all different offices, but they're all connected in one initial landing place to try to help direct the student. So that's a big one, to try to make sure that we are actually finding a way to disseminate that information to our students accurately and quickly. Second question would be, does your orientation for your transfer students address common transfer questions? One of the ways that we decided to do that, to take care of that at Kent State, was to go ahead and create some a transfer orientation Blackboard module. and pardon my picture, they kind of forced me to put my picture on that Blackboard module. We use the Blackboard module to go ahead and cover important knowledge that's required, literally required for every transfer student to review, with quizzes, a self-check quiz, to ensure that they actually reviewed that information. Another question would be, are our advisors equipped with all the transfer knowledge that we need? We all know that transfer students are, transfer advisors and regular advisors are constantly getting shifted around between different students, different programs, but the one thing that should remain consistent is that they're all getting the appropriate knowledge that's needed. One of the things we did at Kent State, we have a pre-orientation training meeting every year for advisors before orientation kicks off, where transfer-related staff are invited to actually present updates, information about our transfer office. This last year, we created a packet because normally we actually hand out these worksheets to our advisors. Because of the way things happened and switching over to that virtual process, we were able to find this wonderful online flip builder to go ahead and take that information to our advisors. Can we do anything to streamline any repetitive processes? We're all doing the job of 3 people nowadays. And so it's more important now than ever to take a look at what tasks and resources are not being used, or what we can do to hand off some of those tasks to our student workers. If we're able to go ahead and dedicate more time to the areas that we need, by doing an assessment of our own policies, our own advising, and really looking at these questions to find out where can we streamline some things, and where is it really the most ideal in that calendar timeline for us to be able to do that evaluation so it's at the most optimal time for our students. It's going to help us streamline ourselves as well and try to save time and effort in the process. So have we defined the process? Every institution needs to ask themselves that. Have we defined it for ourselves? Simply writing down the timeline or a process chart can shed light on more than you can imagine. And honestly, that timeline chart I made at the beginning of the presentation was just a very general, generic. It wasn't dates for our own institution, but just by creating that timeline itself and putting those little red markers in there, even though this is something I know, having that on paper was still eye-opening for me, and is something wonderful that I know I can share with the rest of my own administration. If you define the process for your administration, it's great to do a higher level refresh so that those staff actually know what goes on down at the keyboard level. And for students, transfer evaluations are a mystery. They're like a black hole where courses magically move from one school to another. Sometimes simply displaying the information helps them feel more in control. We're always going to have to give the answer of no sometimes to things. But if they have that information, sometimes having that transparency and giving them that information can develop trust with the students. Even if the students never read the words on the page, knowing that it's there and that they can get access to it anytime gives them that sense of trust. So to sum up, timing is complicated. There are more factors to timing than a lot of people realize. Double touching is a big no-no. It's a huge time waster. No one has time for that nowadays, not this year. We need to find ways to get rid of it and make our advisors and our staff use their time as optimal as possible. Giving students the ability to get their own information earlier can cut down on the mystery of the transfer process and reduce student urgency for that course by course official evaluation. The unknown is stressful to students. Pathways and agreements help a lot, but not every student is able to fit into Cinderella's shoes. Not every pathway fits perfect for every single student. Educating your faculty and your staff on the impact that they can have on transfer students is important. So when you see them setting up potential roadblocks, when they're reconfiguring their curriculum, consider reminding them that they have the power to make transferring into their programs more appealing. I know I like it when people tell me that I'm powerful, so I have to assume that faculty might like that too. So those are just some of the things that I wanted to be able to address with all of you today. This is really the very end of my presentation. So at this point, any questions or feedback, I welcome in the chat. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that this situation, this scenario, this timeline is going to be different for every single institution. So it's important to initiate the conversation right away and just make sure that this is something that you're addressing going forward during this really difficult and stressful time for students and advisors alike. So, and I do not have the perfect answer as to where it should fall in the timeline. I just want to make sure that everybody is understanding and their mind is open to all of the factors that could contribute to that timeline. So thank you so much for giving me time today.
Thank you, Misty, for that really informative presentation. We did get a couple of questions for you, but we kind of got to move some things along. So I'm actually, if you did have a question for Misty, I'm just going to ask, we're going to send out her contact information later, and you can, ask all of your questions there. We're going to do that for each one of the presentators. Sorry. So for now, I'm going to flip it right back over to Deb.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Our next speaker, and I do want to stop and say, Misty, I really appreciate your expertise, and you've given me a whole new appreciation for what goes into transcript evaluation and the timing. Our next speaker is someone I believe who is well known to us all. Dr. Shanna Jaggars is one of the co-authors of the it's almost like a classic textbook for us, Redesigning America's Community Colleges. I've read it a couple of times, but she's also a frequent speaker and certainly an advocate for student success. She is the Assistant Vice President Provost of Research and Program Assessment at The Ohio State University. And a question has come up from time to time about Ohio State and their acceptance of credits, but particularly TAG and OTM, and Dr. Jaggars has been doing some research in that area. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
All right, thanks, Deb. Well, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, I think this is what I need. All right, can we see that all right? I'm actually at the very, I need to go back to the beginning of the PowerPoint. There we go. So what I am the Assistant Vice Provost for Research and Program Assessment for the Office of Student Academic Success at Ohio State University. The Office of Student Academic Success also is a large organization that encompasses a number of student-facing services and supports. And one of the units in OSAS is the Registrar's Office, which handles credit evaluation and articulation. And so we work with the Registrar's Office, and I have some pretty good insight to how they operate based on lots of conversations with them, but I am not myself somebody who does that work. So I don't know all of the details, but I hope that I know enough to be able to give you context around the results that we're seeing. So this is preliminary findings from an ongoing research study. And just to give you some background on that, this study is supported by the Joyce Foundation, who is interested in the possibilities for community college transfer to selective campuses in terms of increasing the proportion of low income and underrepresented minority students who get selective campus bachelor's degrees. And so as part of that project, we have 3 research studies. So one of them is examining excess crediting and seeing how much excess crediting there is for transfer students and what the source of that excess credit is. One is investigating GPA drops. How much do student GPAs drop when they come to a selective campus? How important is that? Do they bounce back? sort of what seems to be the predictors and the outcomes of GPA drop. And the third is an interview study where we have been interviewing community college transfer and campus change students about their experiences coming to the Columbus campus. So in terms of the access crediting study, which is the one that was applicable to the topic today, this is a research study. So we're using a sample from our degree audit. So there's been a lot of studies of excess crediting before, but none that have been able to look at with such detail as we'll be able to do in this study because we're using actual degree audit data provided to us by the registrar. And in this sample, we are looking at students who graduated from summer 2017 to summer 2019 from the Columbus campus, including both first-time entrance and community college transfer and four-year transfer students, as well as campus change students. And we're looking, because this is the first time that we're doing a degree audit analysis, which we knew would be incredibly complicated. We're starting it simple by looking at graduates who had one major and no minor. And so that excludes double majors, dual degree students, but we're still having, over 12,000 bachelor degree earning students to look at. And among those students, about 67% of them transferred at least one course into Ohio State. And overall, they transferred about 114,000 courses, with slightly over half of those being from two-year institutions. So in terms of whether these courses have Ohio Articulation Network numbers and rules, so about 37% of the courses that come into the Columbus campus have a OAN number. About 23% don't and come from other Ohio public institutions. And about 40% don't have an OAN number and come from other institutions that are not Ohio publics. So that just sort of gives you a sense of what kinds of courses are coming in. And of those that come in with an OAN, most of them we have a course equivalency for, and they're mapped directly onto a course that ranges from the 1,000 level, which is freshman, to 5,000 level, which is a graduate level course. And some of them come in and we have no equivalency for them. And these are mapped generally, although sometimes they're generally mapped as general, special, or technical courses. So you can sort of see from this figure that about 11% of the 37% that have OAN rules are being mapped to general, special, or technical credit. And so in order to sort of see how that differs between those that have OAN rules versus those that don't. So here we've kind of broken the courses that come in into those same three categories as those who have an OAN, those that don't, that come from Ohio publics, and those that don't, that come from other institutions. So you can see that for those that they're coming in with an OAN, most of them are being mapped or are articulated as 1,000 level courses, freshman level courses, a good amount as 2,000 level, and then some as 3,000 level. And then we have those general, special, and technical. So we used to have most of these courses that came in were mapped to general credit, and now, and general credit is not as applicable to a degree. Special credit is typically more applicable to like a major specific degree requirements. And so we're trying to work more closely with departments to make sure that courses that come in are mapped either to special credit or if possible to some other course equivalency. If we have a course that comes in that it does not have an OAN number, then each department provides us with guidelines about what they would accept as equivalencies if there is no OAN number to work from. So some departments are stricter and some departments are looser in the guidelines that they provide to the registrar. So some departments say, you know, if the course has these characteristics, just go ahead and assign an equivalency to these courses. We don't need to look at it. Other departments say, we want to look at every single course that comes in that doesn't have an OAN number to make sure that, you know, we look at it ourselves. However, once the department has made a determination, then it is put into an articulation table. And from then on, that's how the course is assigned. So let's say one department wanted to look at the course the first time. Once they've sort of blessed it and said this is equivalent to that course, then anytime that course comes in from that institution in the future, the department will not look at it. It'll just be automatically processed. So you can see that even the ones that don't have OAN rules, a pretty good number of them are coming in being mapped as 1,000, 2,000, or even 3,000 level courses, but we do have a lot of those that don't have the OAN rules that come in as general or special or technical. And so, you know, I think sort of looking at this, it seems fairly clear that having that Ohio Articulation Network number is really useful for making sure that it makes it so much easier for us to be consistent and transparent and efficient in the way that we process these course articulations. So I know I knew that a key question people would have is, okay, so these courses are coming in, especially the ones coming in as general, special, technical. Do these apply to the student's degree at Ohio State? So in looking at excess crediting so far, what we have done is, let's see, if we look at the courses that have an OAN rule, about 77% of them are applied directly to the student's degree, and about 23% of them are excess in some way. And if we sort of divide those that have an OAN rule to those that map to a specific course, which is sort of this middle column, versus those that map to general, special, or technical, you can see that those that map to a specific course, as you would expect, have a much higher probability of being applied to the degree than those that map to general, special, or technical. And in terms of what it means for it to be excess, so we divided excess credits into two kinds. One is just inapplicable excess credit. So this is credit that could not be applied to the degree. And so usually it's developmental, or it is that the student took the course twice. It's a duplicated course. And so you can see that there's very small proportions of those instances leading to excess crediting. More typical is that what we call PAEC, which is potentially applicable excess credit. So this is credit that could be applied to the degree. It could, be applied to a gen ed requirement or an elective requirement, but the student had other courses that they applied to those requirements instead. So they could have used this, they didn't. I think the next step that we want to do here is look more carefully at this potentially applicable excess credit and see how much of it would be eligible only to apply to like electives, as opposed to being eligible to apply to the gen ed or to program specific requirements. And then just comparing those that come in with an OAN rule to those that come in without an OAN rule, you can see, as you would expect, that those that come in with an OAN rule are much more likely to be applied to the student's degree, as we see in the degree audit. So I think that's all we have thus far. This question the sort of specific question that you guys asked me to present on is sort of like a sub piece of the analysis that we're doing, but we expect to be able to dive into it more deeply. And if you have questions, it's actually useful to hear what your questions are, because that can help guide us in thinking about what further analysis we need to do to be able to make sure that this is actually providing a useful picture of what's going on and why. So happy to hear your questions. I don't know if I'll have time to answer them live. I will let the host decide how we're going to manage questions. So I'm done.
Hey, sorry, I was just flipping back on my screen. We had one pretty good question, and I think that we have some time to answer that real quick. And then if there's any others that come in, we just, again, we're going to send out the contact information after this presentation and let people ask then. So this comes from Scott. He first wanted to say thank you for leading the presentation and leading this important study. But in his experience, excess credit is not, because they do not have course equivalents. The issue that he observes is that students are changing to a different program of study when they transfer to a new institution. Do you plan to look at excess credits as a result of major changes?
Yeah, we have done some of that looking already, but we've been doing a lot of preliminary, just like trying to understand this huge complex math data that's coming from the degree audit. So yes, major changing is one of those things we want to look at. One of the problems here is that we don't know what the student's major was at the community college. We only know what their major is when they start here at Ohio State. So if they change their major while here at Ohio State, we can observe that. Or if they come in our exploration program, that's probably a pretty good signal that they are changing their major, possibly, that they had a particular major and then they realized, as they were applying here, that for whatever reason, they wanted to re-explore. But we don't, if they were, let's say, interested in one degree and then they came here and started in a totally different degree, we just wouldn't know that. So that's unfortunate, but we'll do the best we can to investigate that question with the data that we have. But yeah, I think that's a great point.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that insightful presentation as well. I have a cat behind me again, so we are going to flip switch back over to Deb for the last portion.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you so much, Dr. Jaggars. Your presentation is really a testimony to your own commitment to student success, but also to Ohio State's, that they have invested so much time and obviously resources to investigating how students are doing and what can help them be more effective in transferring to Ohio State University. So I really appreciate your sharing that with us. Thank you. Dr. Compton and Dr. Grant of ODHE. Dr. Compton is the Associate Vice Chancellor and Executive Director of the Ohio Articulation and Transfer Network, and Dr. Grant is responsible as the Senior Director of the Ohio Guaranteed Transfer Pathways. So the importance of those OAN rules that you have already identified at Ohio State, Dr. Jaggars, obviously they are in place because of the work of ODHE. So Dr. Compton, can you tell us about what you're doing to strengthen those and how they work effectively for Ohio colleges and universities?
I'd be happy to. Thanks, Deb. Candice is putting up our PowerPoint presentation. We always appreciate the opportunity to talk with our colleagues about articulation and transfer. But I'd have to say the topic, even though it's a very important one, I think all of us would love the day when we don't even have to talk about why transfer credit isn't being recognized at institutions. So what we do have in place right now, if we can go to the first slide, is that we have laws and we have a transfer policy, and we have the website there for the Ohio Articulation Transfer Policy. It's about a 70-page sum document, and we have a specific appendix that deals with all the laws that have been passed related to articulation and transfer. I know we have private school colleagues on this call, and the laws don't usually apply to you. However, many of you choose to follow the type of laws that the public institutions of higher education have to follow. But the Ohio Transfer module, tags, C-tags, the club exam, AP, there's laws behind all of those. But the good thing about the laws when they were written is that the legislators led it up to our faculty to determine what those policies would be to implement the law. And so that has been a very good thing for us in Ohio, because as you know, everything we do in transfer is student focused and faculty driven. So if you're not familiar with our policy, now some people might say, why would I ever want to look at the Ohio Articulation and Transfer Policy? But it is a strong policy, and it's live. We update it all the time. And also, if you would like a list of those laws, you can look at Appendix A. Another thing that we do to try to help the institutions is with the Articulation and Transfer website. And on that website, we have many of our search engines that institutions use to see what courses will transfer from one institution to another and what those equivalencies are. And that's where the OAN comes into play. And so I just want you to know that those websites and search engines are the official statewide guarantee sites for course equivalencies. And later, you can go to the next page. There we go. And later, Candice will talk to you about how the higher guarantee transfer pathways now are going from course equivalencies to kind of program equivalencies. But the other thing that we have are you. You are the transfer champions for the state, because the only way it works is the whole state working together. And I have to say, we are very blessed in Ohio. Here are just some of the examples of some of the committees that we have in place. We have an oversight board that makes recommendations to the chancellor regarding policies and procedures. We have an advisory council where all of our 2-year and 4-year institutions of public higher education have representation. We also have private school representation, and some of our Ohio technical centers are also represented on that advisory council. And this is another thing, you've probably heard me say this over and over again, but we have over 1,000 faculty members who help us with the whole transfer equivalency process. We have our military strategic implementation teams, task forces and committees. We have you all, the Ohio Transfer Council, and we have the Southwestern Council of Higher Education and more. So not only do we have laws and policies and search engines, we have people, and you are the people who make the difference. The next slide, Candice. Another thing that we try to do is we try to find out what kind of appeals students are making to their institutions. I know in the beginning, when you had a checklist, it's important that every student knows that your school has an appeal process, that once they get that credit evaluation, if there's something that they don't feel comfortable with, your school, and this is for the public institutions, need to have an appeal process. And what we've been trying to do is monitor for the last couple years, what kind of appeals have institutions been getting, so we could get an idea where the problems are. So what we have found in the last couple years, that a lot of the appeals are really dealing with from international students who have questions about how their credits have been evaluated. And now Candice is going to talk about how her initiative deals with some of these issues. Candice?
So I hear, as I work on the Ohio Guaranteed Transfer Pathways, I tend to, I really rely actually on all of you who are out in the field working with students on a daily basis to let me know and voice kind of the concerns and the issues that you face. And so I've identified 3 broad areas that I hear a lot about as I work on the Guaranteed Transfer Pathways. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're trying to address each of those areas through our work. So the first of those is non-fulfillment of requirements. So this could include they took the wrong course, such as they took the wrong mathematics course, so it doesn't fulfill a requirement within the requirement that's within their major. The institution didn't count a course how they should have or how the student thinks they should have. The course simply doesn't fit into the bachelor's degree program. I think we heard a little bit about that. Taking the wrong type or level of course, such as taking a biology for non-majors when you're actually a biology major. Those are the sorts of examples I hear about on a regular basis. But the goal here is that, first of all, I guess on a course level, we're encouraging students, of course, to use the transfercredit.ohio.gov to see how things, at least between our public institutions, match up. And then the second step of that is, as Paula mentioned, we've been moving towards not just course equivalencies, but program equivalencies. So the importance of the Ohio Guaranteed Transfer Pathways in providing information that was agreed upon and developed by faculty panels and agreed upon and endorsed through our statewide processes that can give students specific information about general education, like what sort of mathematics course should they be taking if they're interested in a certain cluster area, or even better, a certain major. And hopefully this ensures that students have all the information they need about their program of study and what will fulfill the requirements within their program of study. So I also want to mention here that if something doesn't seem to be working with maybe tags or with the pathways or OTM, C-tags, any of our statewide guarantees, we really encourage you to let us know. We won't always, we won't necessarily, it's not a getting someone in trouble sort of situation. We won't necessarily know about these issues unless you tell us. It just gives us the opportunity to facilitate discussions and figure out why something is not working as it should be, and for us to continue to improve. But oftentimes we find that issues that arise can be easily addressed through a quick discussion with another institution. And it really helps us make sure and smooth some of these laws, policies, and procedures out. So another area that I hear about a lot is a student is undecided for too long. So a couple of the ways in which we're trying to address this is when we're developing the guaranteed transfer pathways, we did create undecided pathways or pathways for undecided students within the cluster areas. So there's one for social behavioral science, there's one for humanities, there's one for math and science. And this just provides a little bit of general guidance to try to help students think about the types of courses they would be taking or to explore. Now, the other piece of this is with the new OTM that will be being implemented in the next year or so, the idea of those 12 additional credit hours on top of the core 24 hours, we're trying to use those 12 hours to help guide students. So students who may be even more undecided than knowing I want to go into a certain cluster area, this would help them, this guidance would help them decide if I think I want to do a degree that would be within an associate of science or a bachelor of science, if I think I want to do a degree that would fall within an associate of arts or a bachelor of arts, what sort of general education courses should I be taking? And so this is aimed at hopefully guiding them to take some of those courses within those areas that would help them decide upon a major. Our goal is to really encourage students to explore enough that they can make a decision and not spend too much time swirling and being undecided, because we know that leads to credit loss. Finally, the third thing I hear is about misunderstandings regarding the academic pathway. And so this shows up in a few different forms. One of them is in terms of thinking that you're doing something and you're not really. So I've heard, for instance, information technology, thinking that you're on the path to go into computer science, even though you're doing coursework in information technology. So some of the work of the faculty panels has really been to talk through these confusions for students and try to lay out some information for them. And we've seen this with our social work panel. The difference between an associate of arts in social work versus doing an applied degree in human services. both have a good pathway into social work, but they're different, and it is going to look different for students depending which way they take. Difference between engineering science and engineering technology, really distilling that those are two separate areas, and there is some crossover, but there's things students need to know about the crossover. Same thing for, as I mentioned, information technology and computer science. So all of these are areas that we're really trying to work with our faculty panels to provide additional information to students. And then, of course, through the guaranteed transfer pathways, this information is all laid out on each of those pathways in order to kind of provide a disclaimer and explanation for students who are thinking about that area. And finally, we know we're making a concerted effort on ongoing communication efforts, figuring out different ways in which we can continue to communicate with all of you at your institutions and the different stakeholder groups at your institutions to convey this information, as well as we've made an effort to also get into the high schools and talk with high school counselors about the work that we're doing and trying to put the resources out for them so that they're aware and can provide students with information as well.
Okay, and then finally, I want you all to be aware that we have a website, and this is for formal complaints. And sometimes students will go through this website to let us know of a transfer problem. And as Candice said, people are not in trouble if this problem comes to our attention. Usually what we do, we contact someone in a position at an institution that can address the problem. Many times it could be an error because of somebody not understanding the statewide guarantee. But I have to say, every time I've got involved with some kind of complaint and I've had to contact an institution, the institutions have been wonderful in how they have reached out to try to help the student. It has all been student focused in terms of helping the student and helping them understand why they didn't get the credit, or maybe sometimes there has been an error and they should have gotten some kind of credit. So again, it's us all working together to help students. And then finally, we're very excited. The Ohio Transfer Promise will be coming forth, and that will be the public school institutions of higher education recommitment to the statewide transfer guarantees. And with that, we're hoping to have a campaign that will do more of the things that Candice has talked about in terms of communication with students and with parents and guidance counselors and with all of you about better understanding what transfer opportunities we have. And with that, I think it's right at 1 o'clock and we've completed our presentation.
Thanks, guys. That was really great. There is currently no questions in the chat. So if you guys do have any questions for Paula and Candice, I just ask that you'll hang on and wait for that email to come with their contact information along with our other presenters today. But I'm going to turn it back over to Deb.
I want to thank Dr. Compton and Dr. Grant. I've often heard that Ohio leads the nation in standardizing the transfer process, and it is clear that, we would be in terrible shape without their efforts and the efforts of the rest of the staff at ODHE. And thank you for making it clearer to us today exactly the work that you do and that it's ongoing and that it will get better and better for all of us and for our students. So thank you for giving us your time. And again, I want to thank Dr. Jaggars and Misty Sommers for their contribution today. I'm so glad that so many of you were able to make time to attend this webinar. I think that it was really helpful information. I really did. I learned quite a bit, so I thank you. Next month, which is February, on February 19th, we will have a webinar on how transfer advising is organized in various models. So I hope you will come back and join us next month. And again, thank you for these illustrious colleagues who gave us their time today.